Martin Beaumont walked into the Grand Hartfield Hotel with his 29-year-old mistress on his arm, convinced he was about to become the most powerful real estate developer in New England. The investors were there. The landowners were there. The press waited outside behind velvet ropes. And every man in that ballroom understood the same thing. Whoever controlled the final parcels of land controlled the future of Hartfield North, a multi-billion-dollar development that could turn Martin's firm into an empire. Martin had practiced his smile upstairs. The smile of a man who believed the room was already his. He did not know the woman he had abandoned 6 months earlier was about to take it from him without raising her voice. Beside him, Isabel Rain adjusted the gold bracelet on her wrist and leaned close. "By tomorrow," she whispered, "they'll all know they underestimated you." Martin smiled. "No," he said, "by tomorrow, they'll know they need me." Then Gerald Whitaker stepped onto the stage. The old attorney wore a black tuxedo, a white pocket square, and the expression of a man who had spent 40 years protecting secrets that could ruin dynasties. The ballroom quieted. Gerald approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "tonight the Alderton Trust formally introduces its controlling director, the individual who holds final authority over $3.3 billion in private assets, including the land without which Hartfield North cannot proceed." Martin's smile sharpened. This was it, the door to everything he wanted. Gerald turned toward the ballroom entrance. "It is my honor to introduce Mrs. Clara Beaumont." The doors opened, and Martin saw his ex-wife walking toward the stage in a deep blue gown. For 1 second, his mind refused to understand what his eyes were seeing. Clara Beaumont. The woman he had called dull. The woman he had left at a kitchen table with divorce papers. The woman he had replaced with Isabel because he believed Clara no longer fit the life he deserved. She crossed the ballroom beneath the chandeliers with Gerald Whitaker at her side, calm as a verdict. Isabel's fingers slipped from Martin's arm. "Martin," she whispered, staring at Clara, "do you know that woman?" Martin could not answer, because every investor in that room had just learned what he had failed to understand during 24 years of marriage. Clara Beaumont did not need his name. He had been living under hers. 6 months earlier, Martin had ended his marriage on a rainy Thursday night. Clara was in the kitchen, rinsing a porcelain cup by the sink, when he came in wearing the navy suit she had once chosen for him in Paris. He did not kiss her hello. He did not take off his coat. He placed a folder on the kitchen table. Clara looked at it, then at him. "What is that?" "Divorce papers." The words landed without ceremony. No trembling, no apology. Just a folder, a pen, and the quiet arrogance of a man who had already rehearsed his escape. Clara dried her hands slowly. "After 24 years, you brought me paperwork?" Martin sighed, as if her pain were an administrative delay. "I want this to be clean." "Clean?" "For Daniel, for the firm, for everyone." There it was. The firm had arrived in the room before his conscience. Martin pushed the folder closer. "My attorney drafted something reasonable. You don't need to complicate it." "By complicated, you mean hire my own attorney." His jaw tightened. "I mean make this harder than it has to be." Clara sat across from him. For a moment, she studied the man she had built a life around. The silver at his temples, the expensive watch on his wrist, the controlled impatience in his face. He looked less like a husband than a man trying to close a transaction before the other side discovered its value. "There is someone else," Clara said. Martin did not deny it. "Isabel Rain." Clara knew the name, a young associate at his firm. Brilliant, ambitious, and always standing too close in photographs from corporate events. "How long?" 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of late meetings, hidden smiles, changed passwords, and business trips that ended with vague messages. Clara absorbed it quietly. Martin mistook that quiet for weakness. "She understands where my life is going," he said. "She has drive, energy. She makes sense for the next phase." "And I don't?" He looked at her with something almost worse than cruelty. Pity. You became comfortable, Clara. Too comfortable. You stopped shining. You stopped keeping up. She stared at him. I spent 24 years helping you become the man who now believes he outgrew me. You hosted dinners, he said. You were gracious. I'm grateful for that. But let's not rewrite history as strategy. That was the sentence that broke something, not her heart. That had been breaking for months. It broke the last illusion that he had ever seen her clearly. Martin leaned forward. I need you to sign without turning this into a war. Hartfield North is entering a delicate phase. Investors don't like domestic instability. Clara looked down at the papers. There were clauses about the house, clauses about confidentiality, clauses about a quick settlement, clauses written as if she were a loose end that needed to be tied before Martin's public life became more valuable. You want the divorce fast because of the project, she said. I want the divorce fast because the marriage is over. No, Martin. The marriage was over when you began lying. This is about optics. His face hardened. Don't become bitter. It doesn't suit you. Clara picked up the pen. Martin relaxed. He thought he had won. She signed the acknowledgement page only, then closed the folder and pushed it back to him. I will have counsel review the rest. His expression changed. That's unnecessary. So was your affair. Silence. For the first time that night, Martin looked unsettled. At the door, he paused. I hope one day you understand that I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be honest. Clara looked at him. Honesty would have come before Isabel. He left without answering. The house went quiet. Upstairs, half his closet was already empty. That hurt more than the folder. He had not simply decided. He had prepared. He had packed shirts, selected cufflinks, ordered movers, spoken to lawyers, and staged his departure like a business transition. Clara sat on the edge of the bed until after midnight. She did not scream. She did not call him. She did not call Isabel. She only sat there, realizing that Martin had not left because she had become invisible. He had left because he had needed her to be invisible. It made his betrayal easier to admire. The next morning, while Martin was checking into a hotel suite with Isabel, a courier arrived at Clara's door, carrying a wooden box her father had ordered, delivered, only if her marriage ever legally collapsed. That was the first sign that Martin had not been the only man preparing for this moment. The box was dark walnut, worn smooth at the corners. Clara knew it immediately. It had belonged to her father, George Alderton. To the world, George had been a modest clock restorer near Beacon Hill, a quiet widower in cardigans who fixed antique mechanisms by hand and drove the same silver sedan for 18 years. Martin had never respected him. He's charming, Martin used to say, which was the word ambitious men used for people they considered harmless. Inside the box was a cream envelope. Clara opened it with unsteady hands. My dearest Clara, if this letter has reached you, then the life you built has been legally broken by someone who did not understand what he was standing beside. Do not call Martin. Do not sign anything further. Contact Gerald Whittaker. There are truths I kept from you because I wanted you to be loved before you were inherited. But power does not vanish because we hide it. It waits. Your loving father, George. Clara read the letter 3 times. Then she sat very still. Do not call Martin. Her father had written that before the affair. Before Isabel. Before the kitchen table. Which meant George Alderton had seen something in Martin that Clara had forgiven too often to name. The next afternoon, Clara walked into Gerald Whittaker's private office overlooking Boston Harbor. Gerald was older than she remembered, silver-haired, precise, and quietly formidable. He did not look surprised to see her. Your father believed you would come only when someone made you question your own worth, he said. Clara swallowed. He knew? Gerald's answer was soft. He knew, Martin. On the conference table sat 12 leather-bound files. Gerald opened the first. The Alderton Trust. I don't understand. No, he said. You were protected from understanding. For 2 hours, Gerald dismantled the life Clara thought she had come from. George Alderton had not been merely a clock restorer. The clock shop was real. His modest clothes were real. His quiet nature was real. But behind that life, over 4 decades, George had built a private empire of properties, investment funds, land holdings, infrastructure stakes, medical real estate, logistics corridors, renewable energy positions, and strategic parcels outside cities before cities knew they would need them. He had not appeared in magazines. He had not joined clubs that published photographs. He had not allowed Martin Beaumont near the truth. "How much?" Clara whispered. Gerald removed his glasses. As of the last consolidated valuation, approximately $3.3 billion. The room seemed to lose gravity. Clara looked down at her hands, the same hands that had arranged Martin's dinners, written thank you notes to his clients, remembered the names of wives he forgot, smoothed over arrogance he called confidence. $3.3 billion, hidden behind her father's clock shop, transferred to her, protected from the man who had called her ordinary. Gerald slid another file forward. "There is something else." Clara looked up. "Hartfield North." At the sound of Martin's project, the air changed. Gerald opened a land map. Several parcels were shaded blue. "The development depends on continuity. Access roads, zoning leverage, environmental mitigation, investor confidence. These parcels appear to be held through different entities, but the final ownership structure traces back here." He tapped the Alderton seal. "To the trust." Clara stared at the map. "Martin doesn't know? Most people don't. And without these parcels," Gerald's voice was calm, "the project collapses." Clara turned toward the window. Below, the harbor moved under a gray sky. For months, Martin had believed he was escaping a woman who had no value left. But the future he was chasing had been standing beside him at breakfast, across from him at charity dinners, next to him in rooms where he thought she was decoration. Gerald watched her carefully. "Many people in your position make emotional decisions quickly." Clara turned back. "I won't." That was the first true act of her revenge. Not anger, discipline. Over the following weeks, Clara became a student of her own power. She hired independent attorneys who had never represented Martin, never played golf with his partners, never owed favors to his firm. She brought in forensic accountants. She reviewed trust structures, voting thresholds, land options, shell entities, acquisition timelines, and every clause tied to Hartfield North. She did not announce herself. She did not post new photographs. She did not buy a mansion to prove she had changed. She sat in conference rooms with marked-up documents and learned exactly how Martin had built his illusion of inevitability. And then she found the memo. It was buried inside a development strategy file prepared by Martin's team. The title was harmless: Pre-Approval Landholder Alignment Plan. The content was not. The memo described elderly landowners as resistance points. It recommended contacting them before the trust's full valuation became public. It suggested pressuring families with short acceptance windows, warning them that delay could reduce their compensation. At the bottom was Martin's signature. Clara read it once, then again. For the first time, the betrayal was no longer only personal. He had not merely discarded his wife. He had approved a strategy to corner people who reminded him of her father, quiet people, local people, people attached to land, history, and memory, people he assumed would fold if pushed hard enough. Clara placed the memo in a red folder, not because she intended to leak it, because truth should always be organized before it is used. Martin, meanwhile, grew impatient with her silence. He sent messages through attorneys demanding quick movement on the house. He claimed delays could create unnecessary financial appearance issues. He suggested she waive certain reviews. He asked Daniel to talk sense into her. Daniel called his mother that evening. "Dad says you're making this ugly." Clara closed her eyes. Of all Martin's choices, using their son as pressure was the lowest. "Daniel," she said gently, "your father wants speed because speed benefits him." He said, "You're angry." "I am." Daniel was quiet. Clara continued, "But anger is not the same as recklessness." "Is there something I don't know?" "Yes." The answer surprised him. Clara had never spoken to him that directly about adult matters. "What is it?" "Your grandfather left me responsibilities, large ones. I'm still learning how to carry them." "What kind of responsibilities?" "The kind that require me not to be rushed by anyone, including your father," Daniel breathed out slowly. "Are you okay?" Clara looked at the red folder on her desk. "No," she said, "but I am becoming difficult to destroy." That answer stayed with him, and later, when Martin tried again to use Daniel as a bridge into Clara's decisions, Daniel refused. For the first time, one of Martin's old levers did not move. 3 weeks later, Clara visited an Alderton property on the Rhode Island coast. It was a neglected brick warehouse near the water, once used for textiles, now wrapped in ivy and salt air. The trust had considered turning it into luxury apartments. Clara wanted to know whether it could become something better. Gerald introduced her to the architect on site, Oliver Hart. Oliver stood near the entrance with a rolled plan under one arm. He was in his 50s, calm in a way that did not feel rehearsed. He had kind eyes, but not weak ones, the kind of eyes that notice damage without needing to perform sympathy. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said. "Clara," he nodded. "Clara." No flattery, no calculation, just her name, spoken as if it belonged to her. Oliver walked her through the building slowly. He showed her where the morning light would enter, which beams could be preserved, where studios could be built, where affordable residences could sit above community space. "This building has dignity," he said, touching the brick. "People are quick to erase things they never learned how to listen to." Clara looked at him. It was a simple sentence. But after 24 years, beside a man who interrupted anything that did not flatter him, the idea of listening felt almost intimate. Outside, the wind moved through her coat. Oliver glanced at her. "You don't have to approve anything today." "Do I look uncertain?" "You look like someone surrounded by people who want her decision before she has had time to hear her own." Clara almost smiled. "Is that your professional assessment?" "No," he said. "That one is free." She did not trust him immediately. She had learned the cost of mistaking attention for care. But she remembered his words. This building has dignity. And for the first time in months, Clara felt that perhaps broken things could become more than evidence. They could become foundations. By late autumn, Martin's confidence had become louder. Hartfield North was appearing in private investor decks. His firm hosted discreet dinners. Isabel moved beside him in public spaces with the polished entitlement of a woman being slowly introduced as his future. Martin loved the whispers. He loved walking into rooms with her and watching men recalculate his relevance. He loved imagining Clara alone in the old house, shrinking into the life he had left behind. Then the invitation arrived. Cream paper, gold lettering, the Alderton Trust seal. A private gala at the Grand Hartfield Hotel to announce the Trust's new strategic direction and confirm future development partnerships. Martin held it in his office with satisfaction. "This is it," Isabel said, reading over his shoulder. "The Trust is finally ready," Martin replied. "For you?" "For the project." Isabel gave him a look. "Same thing, isn't it?" Martin smiled. On the week of the gala, Isabel glanced at the guest list on Martin's desk and laughed softly. "Is your ex-wife coming?" Martin looked over. "Clara?" "She's listed here, Clara Beaumont." He shook his head. "That must be formal courtesy. Gerald Whittaker knew her father." Isabel smirked. "Would she even know what to do in a room like that?" Martin did not hesitate. "No." Isabel laughed again, not loudly, worse, privately, like cruelty shared between lovers. "She always seemed so domestic," Isabel said. Martin adjusted his cufflinks. "Clara was good at certain things, but rooms like that require appetite." Neither of them noticed that the guest list placed Clara's name not among attendees, but beneath executive introductions. Neither of them noticed because neither of them thought to look. That was their fatal habit. They only read carefully when they believed power was already there. Across the city, Clara sat with Gerald in a private conference room, reviewing the final program. Gerald pointed to Martin's name. "He confirmed with Miss Rain." Clara nodded. Good. There is still time to remove him from the room. No. Gerald studied her. You are certain? Clara closed the folder. If I wanted scandal, I would release the landholder memo. I would expose the promises he made to investors about access he did not control. I would let every journalist outside that hotel know exactly how he treated people he thought were beneath him. But you won't. No. Why? Clara looked at the Alderton seal. Because I am not trying to prove I can hurt him. I am going to let him understand what he destroyed. Gerald was silent for a moment. Your father would have admired that. My father hid an empire inside a clock shop, Clara said. He understood the power of timing. On the evening of the gala, Clara stood before the mirror in a private suite above the ballroom. The deep blue gown did not make her look younger. It did something better. It made her look certain. Gerald knocked once and entered. The room is full. Martin? With Miss Rain. Clara's hands remained still. Are the revised partnership statements ready? Yes, the board has approved them. And the Hartfield North structure? Declined. The word settled between them. Declined. Not destroyed. Not exposed. Not punished. Declined. That was the elegance of real power. It did not need to shout to close a door. Downstairs, Martin was performing control. He shook hands with investors who had been avoiding firm commitments for weeks. He introduced Isabel to landowners whose families had held property for generations. He laughed with venture partners, nodded to bankers, and let everyone see that he belonged near the center of the room. But something irritated him. No one had seated him near the stage. No one had asked him to prepare remarks. No one had told him whether the trust's director wanted a private conversation. Isabel noticed. Why aren't we at the front? Martin glanced toward the reserved tables. Old money theater. They'll make the reveal, then bring me in. Are you sure? He gave her a hard look. I know how these rooms work. But he didn't. He knew rooms that wanted to be impressed. He did not know rooms that had already judged him. Gerald Whitaker stepped onto the stage. The ballroom quieted. Martin straightened. Gerald spoke briefly about legacy, land, responsibility, and the trust's new phase. Then he said the number, $3.3 billion. Martin's pulse quickened. Isabel's lips parted. $3.3 billion meant more than a partnership. It meant access, scale, protection, a future larger than Martin had dared to promise. Then Gerald said the name, Mrs. Clara Beaumont. The doors opened, and Clara entered. No one gasped. Rooms like that did not gasp. They shifted. Conversations died. Glasses paused. Executives straightened. Investors leaned toward one another without speaking. People who had once accepted Clara's seating arrangements at charity dinners now watched her as if they had missed the title beneath the painting for 20 years. She walked to the stage with Gerald beside her. She did not search the room for Martin. That was what wounded him first. Not the money, not the title. The fact that she did not need to look at him to know he was watching. Isabel whispered, You told me she was nothing. Martin's mouth opened. No words came, because Clara had reached the microphone. Good evening, she said. Her voice was calm, not triumphant, not cold, calm. My father, George Alderton, was known to many people as a man who restored clocks. A few older guests smiled faintly. He liked that. He believed clocks teach patience. They teach consequence. Every hidden gear matters. She paused. He built the Alderton Trust the same way, quietly, carefully, over decades. Martin stared at her as if staring long enough could turn her back into the woman he understood. Clara continued. The trust now oversees $3.3 billion in private assets, including strategic land holdings connected to several proposed developments. A murmur moved through the room. Then Clara looked directly at Martin. Only for 1 second. It was enough. My father taught me that you discover a person's character not when they need something from you, but when they believe you have nothing to offer. Silence. The sentence did what no accusation could have done. It made everyone in the room wonder who had failed that test. Clara looked away from Martin and back to the guests. For that reason, the Alderton Trust will move forward only with partners whose conduct reflects responsibility, transparency, and respect for the communities affected by their ambition. Gerald stood behind her, expression unreadable. After careful review, Clara said, the Trust has declined the current Hartfield North partnership structure. The project will be reopened under new leadership, revised terms, and a community-first mandate. The room went still. Martin felt his future detach from him. No explosion, no public accusation, no mention of Isabel, no mention of divorce, only a decision. And because Clara owned the land, the decision was enough. The applause began slowly, then grew, polite, controlled, devastating. Martin heard it as the sound of every investor understanding before he could speak. Hartfield North was over. His version of it was dead, and the woman who ended it had done so without raising her voice. After the speech, Clara stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded. Landowners thanked her. Investors introduced themselves. Executives who had once looked over her shoulder now waited for permission to enter her conversation. Martin stood frozen until panic overpowered pride. Then he crossed the ballroom. Clara, she was speaking to a conservation chairwoman when his voice reached her. The conversation paused. Clara turned. Martin, just his name, no anger, no intimacy, no history offered, for free. I need to speak with you. This is not the evening for private negotiations. This is not about negotiation. No? Clara asked. He lowered his voice. I didn't know. That has become very clear. His face flushed. I didn't know about your father, about the trust, about any of this. No, she said. You never asked much about my father. That's unfair. It is exact. The word cut cleanly. People nearby pretended not to listen. They listened anyway. Martin stepped closer. I made mistakes. Yes. I was confused. No, Martin. You were flattered. His eyes flicked toward Isabel, standing several feet away with a face emptied of certainty. Martin swallowed. I ended our marriage badly. You ended it truthfully. Badly was only the method. I still care about you. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Caring after consequence is not the same as love before damage. Martin reached for her hand. She moved back before he touched her. Please, he whispered. Don't do this. For the first time, pain crossed Clara's face. Do what? The project, my firm, everything I worked for. Clara's voice remained low. Everything you worked for depended on land you did not own, trust you had not earned, and people you believed could be pressured before they understood their worth. Martin went pale. The memo. He knew immediately. Clara saw the recognition in his eyes. You signed it, she said softly. He looked around. Clara, I did not expose you tonight. Remember that before you call this cruelty. His pride cracked. And then, in front of investors, landowners, executives, and the mistress for whom he had destroyed his marriage, Martin Beaumont dropped to one knee. A small shock moved through the room. Isabel's face went white. Clara, he said, loud enough now for too many people to hear. I was wrong. I was a fool. I should never have left you. I should never have hurt you. Please, let me make this right. The room waited for a cutting line, a public execution, a revenge speech. Clara gave them none of it. Stand up, Martin. He stared at her. Please, stand up. Something in her voice made him obey. He rose slowly, humiliated not by her cruelty, but by the absence of it. Clara stepped closer. I forgive you. His eyes filled with desperate hope. But forgiveness is not return. The hope died. You did not lose a fortune tonight, she said. You lost a woman who loved you for 24 years. A woman who knew when your confidence was real and when it was performance. A woman who softened rooms before you entered them. A woman who protected you from enemies you did not know you were making. Martin's face tightened. You called her invisible because admitting you needed her would have required humility. He could not answer. Clara looked once toward Isabel. And Miss Rain did not win a powerful man from me. She inherited a man who confused access with greatness. Isabel flinched as if struck. Clara turned back to Martin. I hope you become better from this, truly, but you will not become better beside me. Then Oliver Hart approached. He had kept his distance all evening, speaking quietly with board members near the edge of the room. He came to Clara's side without claiming her, without rescuing her. He simply offered his hand. The quartet is about to play your father's favorite piece, he said. Clara looked at him, surprised. You remembered? I listened. For a moment, the director of a $3.3 billion trust disappeared, and George Alderton's daughter stood in her place. She placed her hand in Oliver's. Yes, she said, I would like to dance. Martin watched Oliver lead her onto the floor. The music began softly. Clara moved beneath the chandeliers with a grace Martin had never noticed because he had been too busy admiring his own reflection in every room. Oliver did not hold her like a prize. He held her like a person. That was the final humiliation, not the lost project, not the applause, not the fact that Isabel had witnessed him kneel. It was seeing Clara with a man who did not need her to become smaller in order to feel large. Martin turned toward Isabel. She stared at him with a look he had never seen from her before. Disappointment without desire. You told me she was nothing, she said. I didn't know. No, Isabel replied. You didn't look. Then she walked away. In the weeks that followed, Martin's collapse was quiet. That made it worse. The first investor withdrew 3 days after the gala. The second requested updated land control documentation. The third asked whether Martin's firm had knowingly overstated its proximity to final approval. Within 10 days, the financing structure began to unravel. Within a month, Martin was removed from all major development conversations. His partners did not fire him immediately. That would have been merciful. They isolated him. His name disappeared from decks. His assistant was reassigned. Meetings moved without him. Men who had once laughed at his jokes began speaking to him in careful legal sentences. Isabel lasted 16 days. She came to his apartment on a Thursday evening, still beautiful, still composed, already gone. I can't be attached to this, she said. Martin looked at her. This? You know what I mean. I left my wife for you. Isabel's expression did not change. No, you left your wife for yourself. I was only the mirror you preferred. He laughed bitterly. You're leaving because the deal collapsed. I chose you because you were becoming powerful, she said. Then I watched you beg power to take you back. She left him in the apartment he had chosen for his new life. It was expensive, modern, and cold. No photographs, no old books, no flowers unless ordered, no quiet intelligence moving through the rooms, making life softer before he noticed it had been hard. For the first time, Martin understood that Clara had not been the background of his life. She had been the structure. And he had mistaken structure for emptiness because it held him up too well. Clara did not celebrate his downfall. She had no appetite for ruins. She moved forward. Hartfield North was redesigned under the Alderton Trust with new leadership, protected green corridors, historic preservation, local business spaces, and housing agreements that benefited the communities Martin's memo had treated like obstacles. Daniel learned the truth slowly, not as a weapon against his father, as an inheritance of responsibility. One evening, he stood with Clara inside George Alderton's old clock shop, now being preserved as a small foundation office. Granddad owned billions, Daniel said, looking at the shelves of antique clocks, and still fixed these by hand? Clara touched the edge of the old workbench. He believed broken things deserved patience. Daniel looked at her. Do you think Dad is broken? Yes. Do you think he deserves patience? Clara looked through the window at the street outside. Perhaps, she said, but not mine. That was the lesson she had paid 24 years to learn. Compassion did not require surrender. Oliver remained in her life without trying to take command of it. He challenged budgets, questioned designs, told her when an idea was elegant but impractical. Clara liked that. He did not become smaller in the presence of her money, and he did not become larger by standing beside it. A year after the gala, Clara moved into a house overlooking a garden she had chosen herself. Not the largest house she owned, not the grandest, the one that felt like hers. There were white roses, lavender paths, old stone, and a young maple tree planted where the morning light touched first. On the evening the garden was finished, her phone buzzed. A message from Martin. I saw the opening photos for the Rhode Island project. It looks beautiful. You always knew how to make places feel alive. Clara read the message once. There was a time when those words would have undone her. Now they only passed through. A memory. A scar touched gently. She typed back, "Thank you. I hope you are well. Nothing more. Not cold. Not intimate. Free." She placed the phone face down on the table and walked into the garden. For years, Martin had treated her like a room he had finished using. But Clara had never been a room. She had been an estate behind locked gates, a foundation beneath his feet, a name he had never bothered to investigate, a woman with her own inheritance, her own intelligence, and her own future. Martin left his wife for a younger woman because he thought Clara had no shine left. He never understood that some women do not lose their light. They simply stop wasting it on men who prefer glitter. And by the time he learned the difference, Clara was no longer standing in his shadow. She owned the ground beneath it.